One of the biggest controversies with John Calvin and his doctrine is not the doctrine of predestination and election, which most people hate. It is the belief that babies who die stillborn or shortly thereafter must go to hell. You would think that someone who had as deep an understanding of predestination and election and saw it with such clarity would not think this way about babies. Why would an innocent baby be subject to go to hell? I'll give you a clue. It has to do with our sin nature. Now, let's look at this next. Yes, John Calvin did believe this, but you also have to remember that he was brought up Roman Catholic, where he was taught to believe in free will as well as other such false doctrines rather than predestination and election, which he did see with great clarity. First, let's verify Calvin believed this in his own writings. In his book, Institutes of the Christian Religion, we read, "First of all, being evil and depraved in every part of our nature, we are already solely because of this corruption justly condemned and convicted in God's sight. For only righteousness, blamelessness, and purity are acceptable to him. So even children from their mother's womb bring their perdition with them. Even though they have not yet produced the fruits of iniquity, its seed is enclosed in them, or rather their whole nature is a seed of sin. On that account, it can only be hateful and abhorrent to God." He goes on to say that only by baptism can believers be assured that the stain of sin has yet been removed. Some of y'all may think he only said this once, and that is a mistake. On the topic of original sin, which is written earlier in the book, Calvin says the same thing. Now, where did Calvin get this twisted thinking from? You have to remember, he was raised Roman Catholic. In the section from the Catholic Encyclopedia on infant baptism, we read, "The fate of infants who die without baptism must be briefly considered here. The Catholic teaching is uncompromising on this point, that all who depart this life without baptism, be it of water or blood or desire, are perpetually excluded from the vision of God. This teaching is grounded on Scripture and tradition and the decrees of the Church. Moreover, that those who die in original sin without ever having contracted any actual sin are deprived of the happiness of heaven." Do we as humans have a sin nature? Well, yeah. Romans 3:23 states all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Also, Romans 5 verse 12 states, "Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned." This also needs to be put in context with 1 John 3 and verse 4. "Whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law." So, putting this in context, when we sin, we transgress the law of God. At this point, we are said to be dead in sin. Let's verify this in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 1. "And you hath he quickened, who were dead in trespasses and sin, wherein in time past you walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience." So we are said to be walking according to the prince of the power of the air, which is Satan, who works in the children of disobedience, or the children of this world, which is why Jesus would have to quicken us, as he does so for his elect, according to John, the 5th chapter. And 1 John 2:16 tells us that all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eye, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but of the world. Let's read verse 3. "Among whom also we all had our conversation in times past in the lusts of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature the children of wrath, even as others. Paul is simply stating here that the elect of God are identical to the children of wrath in their flesh, or the children of the world, and as such we all deserve to go to hell. And we all would, except for that Jesus has quickened, which those who he has quickened, which are his elect. At this point, we have to qualify how babies are either put into this category spiritually, or if they are not. We have what is called the age of accountability. Now, I know some of you disagree with this, but let's look at this scripturally and take personal experience out of the equation for a second. Can a newborn baby sin? No, it does not have the mental acuity or the ability to sin at this point. Even Calvin admits this. Now, the Catholic Encyclopedia said they had to be baptized to go to heaven, which is where Calvin got his thinking from. Now, let's verify one more thing from Scripture, which is our final authority, supposedly, that babies cannot and have not sinned when we read James 4, verse 17. Therefore, to him that knoweth to do good, and doeth it not, to him it is sin. This verse right here validates the age of accountability being true. Does a baby know to do good? No, absolutely not. It has no cognitive ability or mental acuity to reason about sin at this point. It is totally helpless. And in Jeremiah, God twice calls babies innocent. If they are innocent, they have not transgressed the law of God, therefore they have not sinned. Again, once we come to the knowledge of good and evil, or God's law, as in the case of Adam, we go straight for sin. This is our sin nature and has nothing to do with free will. We are designed to sin. You have to keep everything in biblical context here and leave personal experience or feelings out of it. Let's look at one more passage to show babies, in fact, do not have to be baptized to go to heaven, as the Roman Catholic Church says, nor do we carry our perdition, as Calvin put it. In 2 Samuel, the 11th chapter, David not only has an affair with Bathsheba, he has Joab leave her husband and David's faithful servant, Uriah the Hittite, alone in the heat of battle to be killed to hide his sin because David had gotten Bathsheba pregnant. In chapter 12, God sent Nathan the prophet to expose David's sins publicly. David admits this in verse 13. Now let's read verse 14. Howbeit, because by this deed thou hast given great occasion to the enemies of the Lord to blaspheme, the child also that is born unto thee shall surely die. And Nathan departed unto his house, and the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bare unto David, and it was very sick. David therefore besought God for the child, and David fasted, and went in and lay all night upon the earth. The child died, and David realizes this in verse 19. Then David arose from the earth, and washed and anointed himself, and changed his apparel, and came into the house of the Lord, and worshipped. Then he came to his own house, and when he required, they set bread before him, and he did eat. His servants can't figure out David's behavior here at this point in verse 21. Let's read verse 22. And he said, while the child was yet alive, I fasted and wept, for I said, who can tell whether God will be gracious to me, that the child may live? But now he is dead. Wherefore should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me. Now, when David died, did he go to hell? No, not hardly. He was called a man after God's own heart after that. So do babies have to be baptized, like the Roman Catholic Church tells you to go to heaven? According to what we just read in the scriptures, that is a perversion. But what do you expect out of them? Everything they say practically is an abomination. This is not a mistake on their part, as they have just flat out lied about this for centuries. The scripture says babies are innocent and have not sinned, so there is no transgression of God's law. When babies or infants die, they definitely go to heaven, and therefore this automatically relegates these babies to be of God's elect. What He has done has shown His divine mercy in that these babies do not have to suffer the evils of this world. Lord willing, this clears up some confusion on this topic for some folks.